Hello board game brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching on Kickstarter and Gamefound over the next week. And if you're new here, we do this every single week, but I do like to start this off by going over some news and announcements that I just found out about. And what I'm about to tell you, I am a little bit late to the party because this information was out last week, but I just didn't look that closely into it until after I filmed last week's video. So I just want to give you a bit of an update now because Awakened Realms did just announce that there are a bunch of high-profile games that are going to be getting that Awakened Realms treatment. A lot of these are going to be new expansions, while others are going to be re-implementations of very popular games, such as The Labyrinth or even This War of Mine, both of which have fantastic reviews and a fantastic fan following. But the ones that I am most excited about is the special edition of Agricola, which is one of my favorite games of all time. And as a nice bonus, they're also releasing Agricola Dead Harvest, which I don't really know anything about other than it's a standalone edition of the game with its own unique twist where you're going to be growing and managing your garden, but then also protecting it against zombies. I know there's a big debate about whether Agricola is better or is Caverna better, and for myself personally, I'm really excited to see Agricola here because I do think it is the superior game, at least overall, because there are aspects that I like from both of these games, and I wish Uwe Rosenberg would make a third version of the game that combines those best elements of each of them, because in my opinion, Agricola is way more streamlined, way easier to table, and there's a lot less fiddly rules and extra components, and it also has a ton of different occupation cards that can give you all sorts of special abilities, and they can chain together in all sorts of ways, and it adds a ton of variety and a ton of fun into the game. Whereas Caverna replaces this with a bunch of tiles that are just all available at the beginning of the game, and none of them are really all that exciting in comparison to those occupation cards, and also it creates a little bit of AP since you're just getting so many options at once right at the start of the game. Caverna does have the expeditions, which I do think is a fun mechanism, but when I'm playing Agricola, I don't really miss it all that much. But the one thing that I do love about Caverna that is missing from Agricola is that it doesn't punish you for specializing in any particular aspect of the game, whereas Agricola wants you to kind of evenly invest across all options. Caverna just lets you do whatever you want, and it just has way simpler scoring because pretty much everything you can earn in that game just translates to one victory point at the end of the game, whereas Agricola has complex scoring that is different depending on where you're at in the different aspects of the game, and then each one of those aspects does have a ceiling that just stops you from gaining any additional victory points if you do happen to get overly invested in something. So I'd really love to see a game that has the simplicity of the gameplay for Agricola, but that has the simplicity of the scoring for Caverna. I doubt that this new edition of Agricola is going to veer that far off of the core Agricola experience, but who knows, maybe this zombie version will. But if you're looking for a difference of opinion, definitely go ahead and check out Boardgame Code because he likes Caverna more than Agricola, and also him and I do work together keeping track of all these upcoming campaigns, and I do this every week, but he posts a video at the start of each month, going over the month and letting you know of the heavy hitters for that month. And of course, March just did start, so he does have his video up already, and you can go ahead and check that out. But he also has a ton of other excellent content as well, and if you don't follow him already, you definitely want to because he is putting out tons of videos with tons of information. And if you are interested in crowdfunding as well as pretty much everything else to do with board games, Alex will have you covered, and I will have a link to his channel in the description down below. But of course, this video is about the upcoming games launching this week, and we do got quite a few to cover, so let's check them out. And the first campaign we have launches on March 11th, and this one is called The Holiday Hills, and this one is a competitive game where players are each going to be playing as a human and an elf, traveling from house to house, collecting different decorations with their sleighs, and then adding them to the town square. On a turn, you're going to be moving your sleigh around the perimeter of the board, and you can move as far as you want with some restrictions, but you're essentially going to be taking the actions of some of the spaces that you pass over, as well as the actions of the spaces that you stop on. The limitations are that you can't stop on a location that already has another player's token there, and also there are some spaces that you must stop on when you do reach those spaces. When you do reach those spaces, you'll be able to deliver any of the dice that you have in your sleigh, and then you're also going to be drawing one new objective card, which is essentially the main way that you're going to be scoring victory points throughout the game, because each of these are going to have different objectives outlined on them, and you're going to be trying to take the actions to fulfill those objectives in order to score those cards at the end of the game. Whenever you pass over a collect icon, you're going to be rolling the corresponding dice and then adding them to your sleigh, and then whenever you move over a deliver icon, you'll be able to place the dice from your sleigh under a tree. There's also different houses that you can stop at that will grant you with different special actions and effects, such as adding trees to the square itself, placing ornaments, candy canes, or string lights on those trees, or even earning extra dice or other bonuses. Another thing interesting about this game is that when you do move your sleigh, you're going to be choosing whether you want to take the top path or the bottom path, with the top path being better for collecting dice, whereas the bottom path is better for delivering those dice presents underneath the various trees. The game continues like this, and the player with the most victory points at the end wins the game, and if you do want to check this one out and learn more about it, I will have it linked down below. And also on the 11th, we have Edge Quest, and this one is like no other board game that I've ever seen, because this one is a 2-player strategy tactical fighting game. We're actually going to be using little miniatures and manipulating their body at the different joints in order to have a sword fight with your opponent. Players are going to be fighting on this cobblestone board using multi-use cards to control their footwork, the sword itself, as well as try to land some attacking blows. Anytime that you are able to issue an attack, you're going to be rolling dice based on your position and the tactical edge that you have in order to try and inflict damage on your opponent. And edge is a resource that you will be gaining throughout the game if you do play your cards right, and this is going to give you even more manipulation over your dice, essentially giving you more control in an attack. Some of the cards do allow you to perform some special moves, but you do need to be in the proper stance in order to do so. I don't have the finer details on the inner workings of this game, but if what I've told you so far does sound interesting to you, you can go ahead and check out the campaign, and I'm sure they'll have a bunch more information once this one goes live, and of course you can find a link to that in the description down below. And also launching on the 11th, we have The Fate of Venterra, and this one is a competitive empire building game where players are going to be playing over 6 rounds, competing to explore the map, expand their territories, complete various quests, and of course engage in battles. Players are doing all of this to try and gain the most influence, because it's the player who's able to do that that's going to be winning the game. At the beginning of each round, players are going to be gaining different types of income depending on the buildings, upgrades, and bonuses that they have out in play. This, of course, is a little bit of an engine that you'll be able to build as the game goes on, but in order for players to take most of their actions throughout the game, they're going to be using their command cards. Each player is going to have a set of these, and you're going to be choosing 2 of those to put into play each round at this point, with every player choosing those 2 cards in secret and simultaneously. The plan cards allows you to reserve quest cards, move units, or gain additional income. The reinforce card allows you to recruit units, upgrade buildings, or construct new ones. The maneuver card allows you to manipulate the units out on the board, recruit an additional unit, or buy faction upgrades. Then the charge action allows you to move multiple units into a single space, gain wealth, or recruit leader cards. But after each player has chosen their 2 cards, each player is then going to be taking turns resolving just one of those cards each. After all the players have done that, each player is then going to be taking turns resolving the second card that they chose. At the end of the round, each player then has the opportunity to complete one of their quest cards if they are able to meet the requirements of it, and also each player is going to have to pay resources based on the amount of armies that they have in play, and if you're not able to cover all those costs, then you're going to be losing some of your units. Battles are going to be triggered anytime that multiple factions end up in the same location after a movement, and anytime that this happens, the attacker and the defender are going to be calculating their attack and defense values, which you can also manipulate by using your various leader cards, and the battle's going to resolve with some units being eliminated, and of course the possibility of territories changing ownership. If that territory also has a building, the attacker can replace their opponent's building with their own. And I should mention that this is also an asymmetrical game, which means that each of the factions are going to be playing a little bit differently from each other, each with their own different abilities and special benefits. But the game continues like this, and the player with the most influence at the end of those 6 rounds wins the game, and if you do want to check this one out, I will have it linked down below. And also on the 11th, we have The Great Harbor, and this one is a competitive dice drafting, dice worker placement game, and this game does play over 6 rounds, where at the start of each round, there's going to be a bunch of different colored dice that are rolled, and then players are going to be taking turns drafting those dice. Higher values mean that you'll be able to take more powerful actions with those dice, whereas the lower values will let you take those actions sooner. This means that you're going to have to consider how badly you want a certain certain action or how badly you want to prevent someone else from getting there first. Another thing you want to consider is that each of the locations are also only accessible to certain colored dice, but these different locations can do all sorts of different things, like give you an amount of a certain type of resource, allow you to spend those resources to build ships, or even send those ships to distant lands to trade those resources for something a little bit more valuable. And you can also expand all sorts of aspects of your player board that can grant you with all sorts of different actions and abilities, as well as some resource generation. Players can also move up different tracks to gain favor with the different senates, which will also grant you with those specific benefits. But the game continues like this over the 6 rounds, with players rolling and drafting those dice, using them to take the various actions to collect different resources or convert those resources into other resources, or even better, victory points. And the player who has the most victory points at the end of the game is going to be the one to win. And if you do want to check this one out in more detail, I will have it linked down below. Also on the 11th, we have Farmoony, and this one is a competitive game where players are going to be building out their farms in space, or I guess more specifically on the moon. And this is a game that plays over 3 rounds, with each round having a specific mission that players are going to be trying to take advantage of in order to score victory points. Each player is going to be building their space farm out in front of them by placing these different farm cards that are broken into 4 different quadrants, with each of these quadrants potentially having a different type of terrain. You're going to be trying to create different sets and patterns of terrain in order to score victory points, and of course the different patterns that you're trying to achieve will be outlined on the mission card that's always revealed at the start of each round. After that card's revealed, each player is going to be dealt a number of these farm cards, and this is a drafting game, which means that each player is then going to be choosing one of those cards to take and put into play, and then you're going to be passing the remainder of the cards to the player next to you. But each time that you do place a card into play, you're also allowed to use one of your tool cards, which can grant you with all sorts of bonus actions, or even allow you to place different tokens, which also might be required to score the victory points of the mission. But you can also choose not to use a tool card, and if that's the case, you're allowed to add a new tool card into your supply. You do have a limit of 3, so if you are at your capacity, you're probably going to want to use a tool card. But the round continues like this until all of those cards have been used up. And then you're going to be moving into the 2nd and 3rd round, following the same sequence of events. Then the player with the most victory points at the end is going to be the winner of the game. If this one sounds interesting to you, you can go ahead and check it out, and I will have it linked down below. And launch on the 12th, we have Formaggio, and this one is a standalone expansion to their previous game, which was called Formaggio. Because this one is a standalone game, there's going to be a lot of content to come along with this one, which is really nice because you can mix it with the previous game. There's going to be new cheeses to make, new objectives to complete, as well as new upgraded components. But of course, the most exciting part of this is the brand new venues that this version is going to be bringing to the game, with new sections that you'll be able to add onto that circular rotating board. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll come back to that in a second here, but basically each one of these different quadrants are going to feature their own little mini game or way that you can score victory points. And there were 4 of these in the original game, but now that this is going to be bringing in more, you can mix them all together. And you might be wondering, how do some of the different structures work when they were tied to specific venues? And this new version addresses that with the different seasons that are outlined in the center tiles here, and each of the buildings can trigger with the different venues, but they can also trigger with the different seasons. There's always things that can trigger your structures no matter which venues you decide to play with. Other than that, this game should play very similar to the original, which I did cover back when it originally launched. So if you do want to learn more about how these games play and if it's a game for you, I'll just go ahead and roll that previous footage for you now. But another thing that I like about this one is that this is not only a worker placement game, but it's also a simultaneous worker placement game, which means that all players are going to be doing their worker placement at the same time. And the reason that this is possible is because the board is going to be split up into 4 different areas, and you can only put your workers in the area that's in front of you. But you might be wondering, if you can only interact with the section that's in front of you, how do you ever interact with the other areas of the board? And the answer to that is that this is also a lazy Susan. So after every single round, you're going to be rotating that board and putting a new section in front of you. And I really like the way that this is done in this game, because unlike a lot of other games, this one doesn't feel so much like a gimmick, because it does actually serve a very functional purpose in this game. Because on your turn, you'll be able to place out 1 or 2 workers. You'll be able to put 1 worker in the bottom section and 1 worker in the top section. For any of the workers that you put in the bottom, you're going to be putting your colored cheese there first, indicating that you're going to be creating that type of cheese, and then you need to assign the worker matching that cheese type in order to make that cheese. But some cheeses will take longer to age than others in order to complete that cheese, and you only get your worker back once that cheese is properly aged. And the way that this is represented is by the rotation of the board, because each of these cheeses is facing a different direction, and the direction it faces indicates how long it's going to take to create that cheese, because you only get your worker back once your worker is facing towards you. So if you place a worker that's directly away from you, you're not going to get it back until it fully rotates 180 degrees so that that worker is facing you. I'm normally not a fan of players having their own spot where they put workers on their turn, because it does make games normally feel like more of a competitive solo game. But the reason that I like the way that it's done in this game is because even though you are sectioned to your own spot to put your workers on your turn, you still are dealing with the consequences of the other players, because the cheese that they make there and the orders that are already completed are going to be taking up spaces of the board, and each of these 4 locations are going to be representing 4 different venues that have different ways that they score and different objectives that players are going to be trying to achieve. What's really cool about these locations is that they are triple layered, which means that you can slide a board into it, creating more variety and different board configurations every time you play the game. And you can also put these boards in different orders, which can also change up the feel of the game as well. I really love the combination here with rotating the board to get access to new locations, but then also using that rotation to indicate when you get your worker back, because I feel like they're taking full potential of this lazy Susan and making it very, very streamlined and easy to play. But like I said, whichever location you're currently placing your workers at, you do have to deal with the decisions and consequences made by the other players, because these different spaces are going to be slowly filling up with each of the players' cheeses, because as players are putting out those cheese, they actually stay there for the rest of the game. And some of these locations are going to be scoring based on area control and the amount of your color that you have in a specific region, while others might be scoring depending on completing different orders and tables, or even scoring based on completing different patterns and having your colored cheese adjacent to each other. But like I said, you can place up to 2 workers on your turn, but there's a few reasons why you may not want to do that. First off, you're going to be limiting the amount of workers that you have, and you do want to try and make cheese as much as possible because you are racing against the other players. But if you feel like you do have an extra worker, you can use that second worker to place at the center of the board within your quadrant. And that's going to be earning you the associated special resource, which can either be a order card, which if you fulfill it will grant you some additional points at the end of the game, or it can grant you some fruit which you can infuse and augment your cheese with, or it can also allow you to upgrade your creamery, which I will get to in a second. And finally, it can also grant you milk, which is really nice to have because even though you can play 2 workers, like I said, only one can be played in the bottom and only one can be played at the top of the quadrant. But if you spend your milk, that allows you to make more cheese, and you can actually place both of your workers at the bottom. This is really nice, allowing you to get to multiple places before your opponents have a chance, and it also speeds up the end of the game because each player is only limited to 15 cheese tokens for the entirety of the game, and once a single player runs out of all those tokens, that's going to be triggering the end of the game. But like I said, each player does have their own creamery that they're going to be managing throughout the game and also using to track their available resources. And there's going to be a few different things going on here. The first one is that you'll be able to build different structures on your creamery in order to unlock special abilities. You'll also be able to generate milk from your various livestock in order to create more cheese, like I had just mentioned. And you can also have an area to grow different types of fruit that you can use to infuse your cheese with. And then the bottom of the board is where you're going to be putting any of your completed order cards. But the interesting thing here is that whenever you complete an order card, it's always going to be associated with one of the cheeses that you put out on the main board. There's 4 different locations out on the main board, so of course there's 4 different locations located at the bottom of your player board. Anytime you complete an order, you're going to be putting it underneath the location where you completed that order. And then at the end of the game, you're going to be earning points equal to the square of that number. So if you have 2 cards there, you're going to be earning 4 points. If you have 3 cards there, you're going to be earning 9 points, so on and so forth. So the more cards that you have stacked there is going to be increasing your victory point potential exponentially. Really interesting game here. I think it has quite the potential to be a real hit. I love seeing new Euro games that look really, really well designed, but then also bring in some new ideas as well. And I think this one is checking off all those boxes. I'm really excited for this one, and if you are too, you can check it out in the description below, and of course, click to get notified. Also launching on the 13th, we have Hercules and the 12 Labors, and this one is a solo dice rolling game where you're going to be fighting all sorts of epic battles, trying to make it through all 12 of the different challenges in order to prove yourself as worthy to become a god. I don't have too much detail on how the dice rolling works in this game, but I can say that this is a game that looks like it has a lot of attention to detail. First of all, the game just looks fantastic, and you're also going to be getting foiled cards that you can actually piece together to complete a bigger picture. If I were to guess, it seems like you're going to be rolling dice to try and fill in these different areas on the cards, and there'll probably be some different limitations with how you're able to place those, potentially forcing you to put those dice in areas that have negative consequences. The other reason I say that this one has a lot of attention to detail is because they're also going to be including some additional aspects to this game that maybe aren't completely necessary to play the game, but they are a fun touch, and there's going to be these deluxe lore cards that will tell you of the different epic battles of Hercules, which will sort of fill in the gaps of the story as you're making your way from one beast to the next. There's also mood cards that you're going to be revealing between the different battles that are going to be revealing the memories and emotions that haunt your past, but these are going to be adding an additional challenge that can reward you if you do prove yourself resilient. I don't have too much more info on this one, but if you do like solo games and if you do like dice rolling games, this is definitely one to check out, and I will have it linked down below. And also launching on the 13th, we have Widget's Workshop, and this one is a robot crafting game where you're going to be using transparent cards with different robot body parts on them, and you're going to be trying to combine those together so that you complete that full robot, matching as many of the different attributes as possible across the different parts that you use. Each player is going to be starting with their own player board, which is going to have a few different sections where you can build your robots, and you can see how each one of these gears has a different body part highlighted. This is where you're going to be slotting in the different transparent gear cards that you get, and once you've filled in all the different gears within a section, then you're going to be combining all of those gear cards together to complete that final robot. And each player does start with a single gear card at the beginning of the game just to give them some goals to pursue, because each one of these gear cards is going to have some different icons around the perimeter of it, and these indicate icons that you want to match with the other gear cards that you're collecting for that robot in order for it to score the most victory points. You're going to be scoring each unique icon within your robot, but the amount of points you get for that attribute is going to scale depending on how many you do have in that pile. But what's really neat about this game is the way that you get those gear cards, because after each player was dealt their starting one at the beginning of the game, you're just going to dump the rest in a chaotic pile in the middle of the table. Some of those might be upside down, while others might be face up, and some might be completely hidden or partially hidden by other gears. Players are then going to be taking turns either drafting one of the face up gear cards from the pile or two of the face down ones, and then revealing them and choosing one to keep. But once you touch a gear, you have to take it, and even the face up gear cards could still be partially hidden by other cards, which means that you might only see a few of the icons on that card, and you'll be hoping that the other icons are also something that you are looking for. This introduces the push your luck into the game, because you're going to see a bunch of different icons that might be useful to you, but you don't know exactly where every other icon is. At that point, you're just going to be adding up all the victory points from all the players' completed robots, and it's the player who has the most that wins the game. And if you do want to check this one out, you can find it in the description down below. Also launching on the 13th, we have Space Lion 2 Leon Strife, and this one is a portable, streamlined two-player version of their previous game, Space Lion, which I did think looked like a really interesting game because I did cover it back when it originally launched, and I will roll that footage for you in a second here. But this two-player version is a lane-based card battler where players are going to be fighting over 3 different locations. If you're familiar with games like Air, Land, and Sea, I imagine it'll play very similar to that, but like I said, this is a streamlined version of their previous game, so it'll probably share more similarities with that previous game, which is why I'll just go ahead and roll that previous footage for you now, and if you do want to learn more about this one, I will have it linked down below. And this is a really interesting competitive dueling card game, and the main thing that differentiates this from a lot of other dueling games that I've seen, is the way that the different dueling lanes are formed. Basically, there's a dueling lane between each player and the player adjacent to them, but then there's also a lane towards the center of the table where all players are a part of. And each turn in this game does happen simultaneously, so I think it will be quite snappy and quick, but there will be an active player that basically decides which lanes will activate first. And each turn, players get to assign their 7 cards in their hand to the 3 different lanes that they have access to, the one to their left, the one to their right, and the one towards the center. This will essentially put your card into combat, and you're going to be trying to get the most strength in the different lanes in order to win that match. And the reason you want to win is so that nothing happens to you, because every other player that loses within a lane is going to have damage inflicted on them. Each player is going to have a sort of defense token in each of the lanes that they're a part of, but then as soon as that takes any damage, it's going to get flipped to its damage side, and then any additional damage will get inflicted to that player's base. The game ends once all the other players' bases are destroyed, and the last player standing wins the game. But another neat aspect to this game is that players don't have to play all their cards into the different lanes. Instead, they can choose to play it into their own player board, and if they do that, that will allow them to activate an ability on their personal player board, with each of those abilities being different depending on which character's army you are playing as. In addition to their strength, each of the cards can also have different abilities on them as well, so this might dictate which cards you want to put into play and which ones you want to hold back, because some of them will be exhausted permanently while others might come back to your hand, and you can also choose to keep cards in your hand and then use them as additional cards in the next round. This opens up a lot of different strategies for players to explore, and I think it adds a lot of fun of trying to get the most out of your different abilities and the different abilities on the cards that you're able to play. Also launching on the 13th, we have a brand new expansion for the game Gift of Tulips, and this one is the Ribbons expansion. This is going to be adding a brand new tulip into the game known as the Parrot Tulip, but it's also going to be adding those ribbons which you can use to finish off a bouquet in order to get all sorts of benefits to help you throughout the game, but you won't be able to enter that bouquet into the festival, so there is a bit of a trade-off there. If you're not already familiar with the original game, it is a game that I did cover a few years back, so I'll just go ahead and roll that previous footage for you now, but if you want to check it out, I will have it linked down below. And in this game, players explore Amsterdam's Tulip Festival to build colorful bouquets. Each turn, players can draw a tulip card and then take an action, and then they draw another card and then take a different action. Players can choose between keeping a tulip in their bouquet to score major points at the end of the game, or they can give tulips to other players to get points immediately, or they can place tulips into the festival to determine how many points each type of tulip is worth for players holding the most of that type at the end of the game. Cards can be added to the festival face up or face down to be revealed at game end. The game ends when the entire tulip deck is depleted and the player with the most points wins. And also launching on the 13th, we have this game called Pond, which unfortunately I don't have a whole lot of info on, but this is an area control game where each player is going to have their own asymmetrical frog faction, and you're going to be building a deck out of a whole bunch of different frog cards, using those to perform your various actions, and build an engine by recruiting hero frogs that provide permanent abilities. One thing I can say about this game is that I really do love the artwork as well as the really strange looking frog meeples. I'm normally not too big on the cutesy stuff, but I am big on the weird stuff, so this is definitely an art style that I think looks really fun, and if you do want to check this one out and learn more about it, I will have it linked down below. And also on the 13th, we have Wayfinder, the role-playing game, and I normally don't dive into the role-playing games in as much detail, but what makes this one special is that players are also going to be exploring and building a map as they play the game. Players can begin either with a blank map or a pre-made starter one, and then players are going to be using exploration dice to uncover new terrains and encounters, and as they journey through the different lands, they're going to be documenting their different discoveries of flora and fauna, all while trying to seek a new home for their tribe. This is a game that's been designed to be very easy to set up, learn, and play, and you don't need to have excessive role-playing experience in order to get into this one. So if you do want to get your feet wet with some RPGs, this one might be a good starting point, and I will have a link to the campaign in the description down below if you do want to check it out. And also launching on the 13th, we have Duelgeon, and this one is a card-driven dungeon adventure where players are going to be facing deadly traps, fierce monsters, and mini-bosses, but also finding different types of treasure. Each turn features 3 main phases, phases, starting with the movement, where players will be able to move in any direction on the dungeon layout, and if they encounter a monster or boss, they're going to be fighting immediately. You then get to move into the action phase, where if you're in combat, you're going to be resolving the battle using dice, and if you're not in combat, the players may interact with the space that they are on, looting different ruins or using abilities or items if they do have them available. Final phase is the looting phase, where if the player defeated a monster, they can move it to their vault and collect its loot as a reward, but if they failed, they can choose to try and fight it again the next round, or to move away and try a different route. There is a limit to 5 pieces of loot, so if you are carrying too much loot, you do have to drop excess loot on your current space. The dungeon will start to collapse after a few turns, so players are on a bit of a timer to try and escape with as much loot as possible, but if you're able to do that, you win the game, and if you want to learn more about this one, I will have it linked down below. And I was supposed to have 3 giveaways this week, but 2 of the campaigns didn't launch yet, so I guess we'll have to wait on those ones. So the one giveaway I do have is for a print and play copy of the game Supervolcano, where players are going to be trying to build different power plants by harnessing the power of the volcano, and you're going to be using that power to power different cities that either consist of different civilians, which can earn you victory points, or different workers, which can help you build more power plants and pipelines in order to connect more cities. At the end of each round, you're going to be checking if you extracted enough energy from the volcano, and if you didn't, you're going to be rolling a disaster die, which can have all sorts of negative effects. Since this one is a print and play, it is offered worldwide, so if you are interested in entering this giveaway, all you gotta do is check out the Discord in the description down below, head over to the giveaways channel and click the emoji underneath that giveaway, and that's gonna be automatically drawn at the end of the week. Good luck in the giveaway, but we did also have a giveaway from last week, and this one is for a pledge for Coral Castle. One thing to note about this one is that they were only offering free shipping to the US, so I'm not gonna be adding in my usual Ko-fi subscribers into this one, just because a lot of them are outside of the US, and I don't want to rope them into a giveaway that maybe they don't want to pay the shipping for, or maybe they don't want at all. There'll be a lot more giveaways to come, but I think it's best just to keep this one to the YouTube comments, because I did explain all of this when I announced the giveaway, so anyone that entered into this giveaway understands that this one is only offering free shipping to the US, and if you still entered the giveaway and you're outside of the US, I assume that means that you are okay with covering the shipping. But let's do this. Let's draw those comments and pick a winner. And the winner of Coral Castles is Perry Frankie, and I did ask everyone to leave a comment letting us know of their favorite sea creature, and he says that he watched his octopus teacher and will never eat octopus again. I don't know what that means. Or is that a movie or something? Okay, it looks like it's a Netflix series. That makes a lot more sense now, but congratulations on the win. Just reach out to me at adam@shelfclutter.com and we'll get that pledge all sorted out for you. And that is everything I have for you this week, and if I do look a little tired, it's because I had a really late lunch today, which consisted of 2 McDonald's burgers, which definitely didn't help. Not my proudest moment, but we did make it through, so thanks a lot for sticking around until the end. I do appreciate it. But until next time, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.